Hey, what's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of Ricky Speaks Sport with me, your host, Ricky Hayward-Williams. Right, let's get straight on into it. What is going on with Jude Bellingham and England? Obviously, Thomas Tuchel, we know, hasn't selected him for the current squad. Now, the next couple of games are against Wales, which is a friendly. Then we've got a World Cup qualifier, I think, next week against Latvia. Don't get me wrong, you always want your best players available. However, Jude Bellingham is on his way back from injury. He's not played more than, I think it's 70 minutes for Real Madrid since he's got back from his shoulder injury, since surgery in the summer. So there are kind of two viewpoints at the moment. And, you know, I feel like one of them is quite fair and quite obvious. And the other one is slightly more about rumour and more about hearsay. So let's dive into that a little bit. So obviously we know, like I just said, that Jude Bellingham is on the way back from injury. He's not played a lot of minutes for Real Madrid. So he's not match fit really. And he's probably best served staying with his club, getting the treatment that he needs, getting the recovery that he needs and building himself up. And also just to be around his club and to get back into the fold, because obviously he's missed like the start of the season pretty much for his team. So he wants to get involved and get back into the starting lineup for Real Madrid. So I think in that respect, from Thomas Tuchel, that's a good way to kind of manage the situation. But then you've got the other narrative. So we do know that Thomas Tuchel has come out in the past and said that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Jude Bellingham does have a way about him in and around the England squad that can kind of, I think maybe he said intimidate or rub people up the wrong way. We know that, you know, the last tournament, there was a massive thing about Jude and the fact that he potentially said that he didn't want to do any press conferences for one reason or the other. I'm not quite sure what the reasons behind it were, if that is indeed true. And the media lapped that up and basically went for him a little bit. And I think that's slightly unfair because it should be, you know, a player's prerogative if they want to talk to the press or not. But I understand, you know, you're part of the big machine. I think he was part of the leadership group for the England team, so that comes with responsibility. So, all right, you know, it swings and roundabouts, right? However, I feel like Tuchel has indicated that he's not a big fan of some of Jude's characteristics, and that's just my humble opinion. And I feel like he's done that, you know, with things that he said in press conferences. Like I said before, he's mentioned that, you know, Jude does have a way about him that can kind of intimidate other players maybe, and his will to win and the way that he goes about training and, you know, his persona on the pitch can maybe have a negative impact. Again, I am paraphrasing, but if you read between the lines, maybe this is a bit of a hangover from the last tournament. And, you know, we know, like I said, Jude mentioned that he didn't want to do press conferences, or it was reported that he didn't want to. And I feel like if you believe the rumour mill, the way that Jude is in and around the place and on the pitch, he famously scored that, was it the overhead kick goal? He kind of ran to the crowd and kind of said, who else? That was really jumped upon. And, you know, the press have basically reported that he thinks he's Billy Big Bollocks, basically, and that he is the man. And obviously, you know, Jude is still, although he is at one of the best teams in the world, club teams in the world, if not the best, arguably, depending on your viewpoint, you know, he's still a fairly young player. You know, he's like early 20s, and you've got players like Harry Kane in the squad who have been to a number of tournaments and, you know, played a plethora of matches at the top level, and have, you know, won accolades and whatnot. Maybe his persona, maybe his drive, maybe his, you know, certain characteristics can rub people up the wrong way. Look at, and I'm not trying to compare in terms of ability and achievements in the game, but look at Ronaldo. for Portugal. Ronaldo has the biggest personality, he has the biggest ego, his will to win and his drive and his determination is there for everybody to see. He played for Real Madrid. Now, I'm not saying that Jude is in that same conversation as Ronaldo, but he could be. He could be. Obviously, he's a different player completely, plays a different position, but if he carries on the way that he's going, he's already won. He's already won a Champions League. So if he carries on going the way that he's going and going down the path that he looks like he's going to go down, he could be in the conversation for one of the best players ever. He's a world-class talent now. And England are, well, I think we're lucky to have him. Can he run for days? Has he got the drive? Has he got the tackle? Has he got the vision? Has he got that skill set to be one of the best players on the pitch? And yes, he does. You know, it's like build up a personality, build up a player, build up their credentials, give them all the big hype just so that they can knock them down. They can see the story arc when they're doing it. They can see that it's going to, you know, sell papers back in the day. They can see that it's going to get clicks online, clickbait. They can see that it's going to create a discourse online on social media in current day. And all you got to do is go back to, you know, Paul Gascoigne with England. Go back to 1990, Italia 90, one of the best World Cups ever, in my opinion. That's probably the first World Cup that I really understood and like just absolutely loved. Like, I'll do a video about that another time, but what a World Cup. And Gascoigne came out as one of the heroes, if not the hero for England off the back of that. He was a national hero off the back of that. He was on, you know, every single, you know, talk show, every single kids show that could have appearances. He was the, you know, the country's darling, the country's sweetheart at that point. Yeah, he was the man. But then subsequently hounded by the press, couldn't go anywhere. And don't get me wrong, I'm not for 1 minute condoning some of, you know, Paul Gascoigne's, you know, personal behaviour, but I'm talking about as a footballer who's done incredible things for his nation, and then off the back of that, like, obviously he's been built up, and then off the back of that, it's kind of like, you know, it's just getting a bit tiresome. We saw it in World Cup 98, France 98 with David Beckham. Obviously Beck's made a mistake. He had a rush of blood, but he was absolutely crucified. You know, if you're old enough to remember that, it was horrible. I actually lived next door to the pub that had the effigy outside hanging by a noose. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was like, I remember seeing like a news crew outside of the pub, like just like 2 minutes around the corner from my house. Like wild, absolutely wild. And Beckham was obviously built up as a superstar before that. Great young prospect, great talent, married or engaged to like a Spice Girl. Huge news at the time. And then it was like they could see the story arc, and they were just waiting for him to do something where they could just absolutely go at him. And a lot of the vitriol, a lot of the fallout from that, from Beck's and what he got afterwards, I'm sure like a lot of you might have seen his documentary on Netflix. A lot of the fallout from that was down to the way that it was reported and the way that the papers, like, you know, pushed that story forward and like had like a dartboard of like his face and stuff and the most hated man in the country. But is it a good thing leaving Jude out? Do you think he'll make the World Cup squad? I think he will. Will Phil Foden make the World Cup squad? That's another question. We'll probably talk about that next time. But listen, let me know how you feel about all of this in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Smash that like button. Also share, subscribe as well. This has been Ricky Speaks Sport. Thanks for getting involved and get in the game. I'll see you in the next one.